Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's Sequent Learning webinar, The Challenges of Global Marketing. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, David Abramowitz, Vice President of Sequent Learning. David, it's all yours.
Good afternoon to those of you who are on Eastern Standard Time. My name is David Abramowitz, and I'm a Vice President and Subject Matter Expert here with Sequent Learning. Two quick things about myself. I've spent about 25 years of my life working in product management and growing global businesses. As you can see from the picture, I did start with all my hair when I started this. So as we go through the challenges, you'll understand that they are both complicated as well as fun. And I welcome you all to the presentation today and hope you find it interesting. So let me just start with a quick introduction to who we are as Sequent Learning Networks. We are an organizational diagnostic training and advisory firm, and we focus on trying to elevate the skills and the capabilities of your people and you yourselves in product management and marketing with the obvious goal of improving the success of your products, solutions, and services. And I want to just take a moment to clarify, when we speak throughout this presentation about a product, think product, solution, service, platform, for the purposes of the marketing approach. As we say, a widget is a widget. We're in business because of our CEO and founder of the company, Haines. He is a world-renowned expert in product management. He has written 3 books, 2 of which you see here, Managing Product Management and the Product Manager's Survival Guide. And he has just about to come out with the Product Manager's Desk Reference 2nd edition. So get it while it's hot. You can pre-order it at Amazon.com. Without further ado, I'd like to jump into the subject matter of the day. So we are going to be talking about defining global marketing. Let's call that the what it is. The second is approaching global markets, its challenges, and the changes in the marketplace that affect it. Let's call that the why. Why are we interested? Global marketing strategies. Well, we can call that the how. How are we actually going to do it? What's the marketing mix going to look like? And what sort of pitfalls might we run into? And then lastly, how to be globally successful. Let's talk a little bit about at that stage the next steps that we can think about in terms of moving forward. I also want to just set up the expectations. As this presentation is not a lifelong journey, but with question and answers, about an hour, we will not be able to answer all of these questions in terms of this life journey that you'll be on. But I guarantee you that if you get involved with global marketing, it'll be the most difficult job you'll ever love. And forgive the cliche, but you will find that it will expand your horizons and skills, and you'll find it dynamic and exciting on a daily basis. So, what is global marketing? Well, I'd like to start with a quote from Thomas Friedman, who is a 3-time Pulitzer Prize-winning author, New York Times bestseller, and written a book about the globalization of the world. And he says that, and I quote, "Globalization is the inexorable integration of markets, nation-states, and technologies to a degree never witnessed before, in a way that is enabling individuals, corporations, and nation-states to reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before, and in a way that is enabling the world to reach into individuals, corporations, and nation-states farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before." So what does that mean? It really means that the world is getting smaller. As we know, this affects everything we do. So how does global marketing tie into this? Well, we believe that the concept of marketing is a universal. But we also know that as we move across the world, the practices and the execution of that concept may vary. Global companies are those that view the world as one market. The strategy itself should look towards enhancing the firm's performance across a portfolio of regions and countries. And the companies that will follow this approach will survive and prosper into the next century. So here we go with our first question. What I'd like to find out is, does your company have a defined global marketing strategy? A, I am fully aware of my company's global marketing strategy and regularly use it. B, I directionally understand it, but cannot recite it formally. C, I believe that my company has a strategy, but I'm not aware of what it is. Or D, I do not believe that my company has a formal strategy. So if you'll take a minute. Okay. It looks like the results are in. You all have spoken. And interestingly enough, it looks like it's pretty evenly split between those that directionally understand it, the ones that are not aware of it, and the ones believing that their company has no formal strategy. So that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us today. And let's see as we move forward whether this helps. So the market's getting smaller economically, politically. We find that protectionism, which had been sort of the rage of the beginning parts of the 20th century, are declining, and economic integration is rising. Stronger global competition and companies are out there. They're in every industry. They're buying up newspapers and food and guns and cars and computers and beverages. When I say guns, I mean gun companies. And the global consumer and global cultures are emerging and becoming much more similar. In fact, global teenagers who are sort of on the leading edge of fashion and, let's say, coolness, there are 1 billion consumers that are in the teenage from 12 to 19, and they've got $200 billion to spend. That should give us a bit of a pause on some opportunities that all of us might be able to find out. And just to give you sort of another statistic, in terms of foreign investment in the U.S. versus our investment overseas, there is $4.4 trillion more investment from foreign companies in the U.S. than we do overseas. That balance shows that pretty much the market has become very fluid. And if I told you that the Wall Street Journal was owned by the Australians, Land Rover by the Indians, or Anheuser-Busch by the Belgians and the Brazilians, that kind of gives you a sense of sort of what's happening. So are there any challenges about going global? Any of you who have been involved with this sort of already know that answer. It's extremely dynamic. And there are 3 major challenges that I want to talk about next. They are cultural diversity, economic considerations in terms of development and purchasing power, and the political regulatory climate. So we've talked about the what. Now we're going to talk about the why it's interesting and why it's a challenge. So what is culture? Well, Gert Hofstede, who's a Dutch expert on cross-cultural studies within individual societies and organizations, says a culture is a collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one category of people from those of another. Put another way, it's a way of living that's transmitted from one generation to another and is often shown through societal organizations and the way people live. It can have both physical and non-physical attributes. I know that might sound a bit strange, but think physical in terms of things like clothing and tools, cars, iPhones. Non-physical, religion, attitudes, beliefs, values, those sort of things. And have both conscious and unconscious values, ideas, attitudes, and symbols. So, having said all that, we've sort of outlined it. Cultures should be really easy to understand, right? If you guys were responding real time, I'm pretty sure you'd say, not right. So there's some kind of integration that's got to go on between the values, the customs, the symbols, and the language that can give us a roadmap or a signpost in terms of sort of the pitfalls and where we'd like to go next. Unfortunately, as we move into the global marketplace, personal and professional values and customs are not universal. Whether we've had this experience within our own organizations with our diverse work culture, or whether we've been on vacation, or if we've had to do business in the global context. One possible example of this could be the U.S. is the only one in the world that has something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977 that prohibits us from doing certain things in the global marketplace that other countries may be able to do. Personal relationships and cultural symbols, actually the study of cultural symbols is called semiotics, do matter. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. And even in terms of professional relationships, there are different styles of management, whether it's a command and control or a top-down management, which in the Spanish culture is called compadrazgo, which is literally you have a boss who both has a responsibility to take care of the workforce as well as to direct the workforce, or a group decision-making, nemawashi in Japanese, which is basically a communal sale before the sale. So you try to have groupthink. And then we've probably all found this out either in our personal lives or professional lives, that communication is more than just words. It's also context, verbal, and nonverbal. So let's talk about economic and political considerations first. How do we decide, if we haven't decided yet, where we want to go overseas? People use words like developed and emerging countries. Those are now becoming more obsolete in terms of words. And you might have heard some of these acronyms thrown around, like G6, G7, G8, the BRIC countries, CIVETS, MINT, N11. Let's spend a minute on those. So the G6, as you might know, started in 1975, where they picked the 6 countries that they thought were the wealthiest in the world and formed a group. Over time, they became the G7, and with the possible addition of Russia in 98, maybe it's the G8 now. BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. CIVETS. I would ask you this question if you guys were live, but Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, South Africa. Goldman Sachs has come up with MINT and N11. Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey, and the N11 are the next 11 countries, which they feel have both the growth rate and income potential to be interesting countries. Then you have a concept called the bottom of the pyramid. This is a very controversial one, and this has to do with what about the huge percentage of the world population that are on the lowest end of the economic strata. Many companies completely discount them, but there's a whole study that talks about this, and in fact, sub-Saharan Africa has been the fastest growing region for cell phones in the world over the last 5 years. So depending on what business you're in, this is not a straightforward decision. In fact, economists are now saying that by the end of 2014, China could be the number one economy in the world, surpassing the U.S. One way to look at it is a technique we use called Presto. Look at the political, regulatory, economic, social, technological, and other trends that affect the world in which we live and work. There are World Trade Organizations and organizations set up specifically to help us interact and conduct business on a global basis. And then obviously, watching the news or world events, political stability continues to be one of interest both in our personal lives as well as how we conduct business. So, this brings us to question number 2. How do you stay current on the global marketplace? A, I am fully current through the use of real-time resources and frequent direct personal interactions with global customers and the marketplace. B, I occasionally follow it by reading articles or research newspapers and or watching or listening to the world news. C, I have a basic understanding of it, but just for select customers and markets. Or D, I do not stay current. Let's see how you guys view this. Okay. Well, it looks like the majority of you do stay somewhat up to speed in what's happening in the world around us. A smaller percent do not stay current, which is very encouraging. And 12% say that they are fully current through real time and through frequent direct personal interactions. To be successful ultimately in the global marketplace, the first part's easier, which is real time. The second is not so easy. And that's where sort of the magic sauce comes from, which is that frequent direct personal interaction out in the marketplace. So thank you. So, we've talked a little bit about the first two areas, which are the what and the why. We've defined for you a context around global and global marketing. We've given you a sense so far of some of the challenges in the marketplace. And now let's talk a little bit about the how. The how being, okay, if we are marketers, global business professionals, how do we actually create an approach that could help us be successful in the global marketplace? So let's talk for a bit about the marketing mix. And having said that, does culture really matter? I mean, we're business people. That sounds like soft science. So here are the three tasks of global marketers as we see them. The first is to study and understand cultures where they'll be doing business. A bit strange. Clearly, we have to be experts in our products, services, or solutions. But do we spend a lot of time trying to study and understand the cultures where we're doing the business? Understand how an unconscious reference to our own cultural values may influence their perception of the market. We routinely, as humans, have an opinion. We are built in with built-in biases. One of the key success factors is the ability to recognize that and then to attempt to move forward. Some people may connect this to what's called the EIQ, which many of you probably know, emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and empathize, versus IQ, which is intelligence. The third, incorporate this understanding into the marketing planning process. So let's go out, let's figure out what's going on out there, and let's figure out a strategy to integrate it into what we want to do next. But unfortunately, our life just got a lot more complicated. If you'll start with the small blue circle that says domestic market, 4 Ps. The 4 Ps are product, pricing, promotion, and placement or channel. So in our domestic marketplace today, we have control to a large sense on what we do with our 4 Ps. We can change the product. We can alter the price. We can promote our offering in a different way. We can choose to go to different channels or verticals. What happens when we step outside our own little world? Well, even in the domestic market that we're in, we've got influences beyond ourselves, whether it's competition, whether it's regulatory, whether there's an economic issue, or technology has changed, or another, let's say, complicated weather patterns. Now it starts to get more uncontrollable. Take a step beyond that and look at that at a global level. You can imagine the complications that have now entered, whether it be from the global competitive set or distribution, or obviously the global presto trends that are moving at the speed of sound and probably into the speed of light. And then, beyond that, there are the individual countries that we have to actually enter, and they have their own versions of this, their own competitive culture, infrastructure, geographical issues. So the more we go beyond our own shores, the more complicated our life gets. But not to worry. Hopefully I can give you some thoughts that can help. So the 2 key areas of focus is choosing the target market and developing your market mix. This is probably mother's milk to many of you, but let's talk about that in a global marketing context. The first, global market participation. If you are in that world today, your company has operations in major world markets and fully understand what that means. Many companies are at the second point, standardization versus adaptation. Do you have marketing mix elements that you adapt per market? This is kind of the think global, act local thought process. Third, concentration of marketing activities. Do you have a marketing mix in one or maybe only a few countries as opposed to international and then later global? And then as you get to the global marketing model, you have a coordination potentially of marketing activities which are planned locally at the corporate level and executed across the globe. Think Coca-Cola, let's say, which is one of the most globalized products in the world. This is a lot to take in. So we need some models to help us. So as we enter the 4 Ps, this is just one model that was created by Igor Ansoff from Harvard. And again, this is just one possible model you can use to help frame these issues for you. So if you look at the upper left red box, you'll see this is the existing product in the existing market, a market penetration strategy. I think most of you are comfortable with what that means. It basically means fighting for a larger share of that market. And in terms of risk profile for the company, I think we kind of do this on a daily basis. As we continue from left to right, we have the blue box, a new product for the existing market. This could be a line extension or some sort of derivative of what we already do. So this is selling something to our current market that we hadn't sold before. Obviously, risk gets a little higher there. If we go to the bottom left green box, we take what we know, our existing product or service, and we go to a new market. That could be a new vertical or a new geography. There's some moderate risk there. I would suggest that actually, no disrespect to Ansoff, I would suggest that I would rather sell anything to the customers I know than the product I know to a new customer that I don't. That's just my opinion. And then the last one on the bottom right, this is the new product, new market, complete diversification strategy. This is obviously the most risk because we're creating something new to sell to people that we don't know yet. So this is just a framework that can hopefully give you a tool to start taking what we've talked about. So there's the first P. That's the product. How about pricing? This is easy, right? Even in our home markets, it's easy. Well, no, it's more of an art than a science, to be honest. But if we keep in mind that market-based pricing means that the customer or users decide what the price is, then yes, indeed, it's a little easier. And whether it's, a narrow band of price sensitivity or not, at least we have an anchor, which is the end user or customer who will help. But there are countries that tell you how to price. They may tell you what currency to price it in. They may tell you if you're low-priced or high-priced. Well, we think this might be outside our own borders, but in fact, in Congress right now, they've called one of the pharmaceutical companies to testify because they've invented a drug, without mentioning or calling out the company, which is unique in the marketplace, and they've set a price which they feel is reasonable, and Congress wants to know whether it's reasonable or price gouging. So maybe even in our own country, we may have these constraints. And then, let's say you're going overseas. Let's say you're going to the developing world, or the civets, or the Mint, or the N11. You could have cross-currency rates that will drastically affect your bottom line. For fun, I've included a fun example that I actually lived a bit through. If you look at the bottom left, you will see a 1,000,000 peso note. That's 1,000,000 pesos from Argentina. I, in fact, own one of these because I was living there after this no longer became real currency, and I found one in a tip basket at the opera and paid $1, which they were very happy to receive for it. This is hyperinflation. After that, they said this was too many zeros. Let's move to the Austral, and then we'll do 100,000 instead of 1,000,000. Well, okay, I'm with you. Well, then if we fast forward into today's market, this was only in 2001. Imagine a world where each individual province created their own money. This is a 100 peso note from the Provincia de Buenos Aires. So the region of Buenos Aires printed their own money. Imagine trying to get your goods or services paid for in each individual region with individual currencies, not the global or, let's say, national currency of the country. So as you go overseas, this cross-currency rate does drastically affect your results. So that's the second P. Third P, promotion. And I know people in the service industry may tell me, we don't do promotion. We don't advertise. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Everybody, I think, is familiar with the top line, print advertising, outdoor, TV, cable, radio. Do you think about it also in terms of if in your world you do thought-leading articles or speak at a conference, do you think about your brochures and data sheets as a way of promoting your product, service, or solution? Do you think of customer service as the same? Worth considering. And then, of course, we've got the social media trend and the communities that it creates. Many of you from the B2B world are fast adopting the social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or some sort of YouTube or intranet video, whether it's blogging or LinkedIn. Clearly, the importance of getting to our customers, consumers, and end users is paramount, and we use whatever technique works the best. The fourth P is placement or distribution. This gets even more complicated as we move to a global structure because it's not the same as it is in the U.S. We would have to make some choices about whether it's indirect or direct, whether we're just going to do web online. In fact, Victoria's Secrets does business in a web matrix model. Overseas, the channels are often extremely long and complex, which obviously has impact on everything from time to market to obviously control in the amount of return on investment you can get. So how do we do this? Well, a lot depends on your goals and the company's goals. So before we move on from the 4 Ps, I just want to make one more comment because I want to make sure that the linkage between the 4 Ps is clear. Everything we do, every touch point we have between us and the consumer, the customer, and the end user could be a manifestation of the 4 Ps. Everything we talk about reflects back on our product, reflects something about our value proposition and our price, is a way of promoting, and addresses directly the channels in which we sell. So we're saying, this is kind of textbook 4 Ps. Unfortunately, once again, culture does matter. So what you do so with care. And I've just given you a couple examples here. Mexico has a huge McDonald's franchise system. And the Mexican owners and franchisees of McDonald's put a Mexican flag seal on their tray liners to honor Mexican Flag Day. So these are Mexican owners, and the Mexican authorities came into McDonald's and confiscated all their liners because they viewed it as disrespectful to put the national flag under food. So here is a situation where in their own culture there was a stumble. How about aesthetics, right? We always say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, that's true when you go overseas, for sure. How about just color? Red means good luck in many countries. It can also be offensive in others. In parts of Africa, it communicates death. How about communication, since we're talking about that? Verbal versus nonverbal, we've all been told that we communicate more nonverbal than we do verbal. If you hadn't seen, a year ago, almost exactly, there was a huge international incident because of a U.S. handshake in South Korea. And the net takeaway of all the news was this a cultural difference or bad manners? In fact, it was Bill Gates, the richest man in the world, shaking hands with the female president of South Korea, President Park, and the unfortunate occasion was he shook with one hand in his pocket, which communicates dishonesty, and he also did so very enthusiastically with a smile and a grin, which also, unfortunately, communicates that he's just plain rude. Now, if he stumbles like this, and he has all the resources at his disposal, what chance do we possibly have? Well, let me give you some thoughts on how we can be more successful. The first is, how do we want to approach our individual markets? We can do everything from sticking to what we currently do in our own domestic marketplace to a laddering of more and more investment and more involvement in the foreign marketplace. We can go from exporting to distributing, some sort of relationship, whether it's licensing or joint venture, to many of you might be from multinational companies already, where you have direct investment, people and resources on the ground. Well, the good news, bad news is, as you go higher on this ladder of investment, your profit and marketing control goes up, but so does your investment and your risk. So this is truly, to be successful, a double-edged sword that must be dealt with strategic forethought. So we can tie our global marketing involvement directly to how we're going to be entering the marketplaces. Clearly, if we're in our own domestic marketplace, we have no direct foreign investment. If we start to move to the export distribution model, we may have infrequent marketing to support the export business or the distribution of our business. We may be entering a market or two and might have some regular foreign marketing. We may have international marketing, which is not global, but could be a region of the world or multiple markets, till we get to a place where we'd like to look at the world as one, and we have a global marketing strategy and message. So, how do we become successful? I've tried to capture 4 best practices that I've seen companies do who are successful in global marketing. The first is aligning global marketing strategy and geocentric orientation. What does that mean? Well, we've talked a little bit about what global marketing strategy is, and geocentric orientation is nothing more than looking at the world as a whole, single market, where we're looking for global norms, global habits and practices above focusing in on the individual market differences. And in this, culture does matter. This is not cheap. We have to dedicate resources. Each of you probably have a defined payback when you do an exercise of this nature. We know that as you move into the expanding, developing world, that payback gets longer. So there must be a focus on the future financial growth and return, not immediate. Unwavering commitment, drive, and patience. What does that mean? This stuff can get complicated. Stuff happens. The company must have the continuing commitment once they do this, and the drive and the patience to see it through when things don't go always the way we think. And then the ability and the talented people to execute it. Many companies have the will, but not the way. And the way comes from developing this ability and the people who understand this marketplace. And in fact, this is both a science and an art. The science being classic marketing, entry strategies, business development, and the art obviously comes from how to handle cultural differences and nuances. So that takes us to our last question. Let's see if I've helped you communicate this in terms of the importance, and see if you feel that your company can be successful in the global marketplace. So A, I fully believe that my company has the resources, commitment, and ability to be successful. B, I think that my company has the resources and commitment, but not the ability. C, I think that my company has resources, but not the commitment nor the ability. Or D, I think my company has neither resources, commitment, nor ability to be successful. let's see what you guys think. Well, I'm happy to say that close to 80% of you feel strongly that the company has a good chance to be successful. About 60% of you feel that the company already has the resources, commitment, and ability to be successful. So that's very encouraging. And for those who think that their company doesn't, maybe we can help. We do offer 2- and 3-day product management and marketing assessment workshops and advisory products. You can contact us through the website or from our phone number. We have upcoming public workshops in product management in July in New York, August outside of Boston, and September in New York, where we will go through the entire product management lifecycle model from the birth of an idea to whatever the elegant exit, decline, removal from the market you use in your own verbiage. We have a very exciting upcoming event in October. We have a leadership summit where the top product management executives in the world come to join us for a one-day seminar where they will listen to leaders of different companies and different industries talking about the importance and their learnings from product management within their own space. And that's in New York in October. It's an awesome place to do networking and to learn about best practices. So before I close, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today about one of my lifelong passions. I thank you for your time. For those of you who are not East Coast time, I also thank you for either getting up early or staying up late. Please, if we can be of use our resources here. You'll be able to go back and listen to this video again and access the charts if that is of use to you. And if I can be of any help myself, there is my contact information as well. So thank you very much in my name and in the name of Sequent Learning Networks for your time today.
Thank you, David. We do have a few questions that have come through here. Once again, to anyone that would like to ask a question and may have forgotten how to, you can select the Q&A tab at the top of your screen and then select Ask New Question. Our first question, David, if global companies view the world as one market, how do they deal with the local or cultural preferences and design, style, or other factors?
Well, that's an excellent question because that gets actually to the heart of sort of where I was driving the whole presentation. One is the thought process. The thought process is the assumption, and this is maybe slightly different, but the assumption that the global marketplace can be one. So that is our first assumption, and that's where we will look first. We will see if indeed they do need to be different from everyone else. And in fact, if they are, that's the concept of thinking from a global platform perspective and only changing the elements that are required for local market demands and true differences in habits and practices.
Thank you. How do marketers align around a unified strategy when we're working virtually and in different time zones?
That's an awesome question. And having been in charge of over 50 countries myself and living in 6 of them, that is an absolute dead-on question. The true answer to that is global business professionals and global marketers don't sleep. Now, having said that, there needs to be in a global run company, there is a centrally driven strategy, and then there will be frequent interactions with the local marketplace. So you will have global marketers in, let's say, home office interacting directly with the lead marketers in the individual markets. And that's a two-way street. That's both where the insights come from the marketplace, as well as the best-in-class marketing approach from home office. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Dealing with FCPA in your experience or study, does it give the U.S. a competitive disadvantage?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question. Yes? Teresa?
It looks like the question may have just disappeared on me, so let's move on to the next question. And if that user
I don't mind answering it in a different way. I'm not sure what the question was, but if the question was, are we in a competitive marketplace where we compete unfairly against other companies? The true answer, unfortunately, is yes. But in terms of our expertise in our products and services and solutions, we will require, it will be required from us to be the best at that value proposition versus others that may have other local market competitive advantages.
Excellent. Thank you. And what would you recommend as the first steps to take before taking our products into a new country?
Awesome. Well, the first thing, for those who aren't regularly in touch with the lifeblood and the pulse of what's going on in the marketplace, that's the first place I would start, is to start understanding the presto, the political, regulatory, economic, social technology, and other trends that are happening in the global marketplace. The second thing is obviously an in-depth knowledge of what it is we do for a living and what we're good at. The third is, and maybe using a model like Ansoff, is to decide where your target markets make most sense, make sure the company is aligned on that, and then those who run travel budgets are not going to like this. There is no substitute for getting on a plane and flying into the marketplace and looking people face in the face and learning what it is to do business there.
Thank you. Should I learn the local language in a market area in which we are considering expansion?
Having lived in 6 different countries, I can tell you that there is no substitute for learning the language. Language is an entryway into the culture. Having said that, there are clearly very difficult languages to learn in the world. So if you cannot learn the language, I would suggest you learn the rudimentary politeness of the language so that people feel in the local markets that you are interested in communicating with them. And then most people in a big enterprise world, they speak English. But if you can start the conversation and show that you are doing your best to try to speak literally their language and culture, you will have an easier time than, I would say, a 1950s American approach, which was very isolationist and everybody should, speak English.
Thank you. How can you best learn cultures if you do not have your feet on the street in certain markets? Would it be through agents, courses, secondary research, or another way?
Well, I'm glad they brought up secondary research because you can always create a baseline. There are, whether it's Gert Hofstede that I talked about, the J-curve, there are tremendous amount of resources about learning about cultures from other countries. So there's plenty of secondary research that you can do to start with. And most of you, if you live in and work in a larger company, have resources within your own company that could be of some assistance, whether it's Americans who were native born in another country or have contacts in another country. So part of this is networking, part of this is research, and part of it is, even if it's a week trip, get there and see it for yourself.
Excellent. What metrics do you find are best for measuring the effectiveness of your global marketing efforts? Do these metrics need to be adjusted based on region?
So that's kind of a two-pronged question from my perspective, because I think, as I said earlier, the payback and the investment and risk profile required in certain markets are much larger than in others. So the common adage is, if you can't figure out a way to do it, figure out a way to measure it. If you can't figure out a way to measure it, don't do it. So whether it is return on investment, let's think from a licensing or distributor model perspective, you know what your revenue and profit expectations are going to be from that marketplace. You can look at market share. You can look at competitive response. You can look at customer satisfaction. So just the same metrics we use in the U.S., we can use on a global basis. It is just more challenging, and ultimately you'll need a system to consolidate that information to give you a more global view. But net-net, if you can't figure out a way to measure it, it probably means you're not ready to do it.
That's a very good point. Our next question. I still think we have a very U.S.-centric perspective on global markets. Do you think that other non-U.S.-based multinationals have the best global perception?
I think if we look at the transition of what we used to call the developing world and what's happened with them, they've learned the game much quicker than we have. I think historically the Anglo world has been less open to cultural nuances and cultural differences. If you speak to somebody in one of the small northern European countries, they routinely speak a half a dozen languages and speak it fluently. For Americans, we're historically been isolationists. So there are, whether you think about the Japanese car companies, whether you think about the Indian conglomerates, whether you think about Chinese technology, they're growing. Their growth curve in global marketing is going faster than ours.
Thank you very much, David, and that is all of the time we do have for questions today. On behalf of Sequent Learning, I would just like to thank all of you for joining us and for your participation. Also, a very big thank you to you, David, for your wonderful presentation today.
Oh, thank you very much.
At this point, I will ask that you take a moment to fill out the survey that you see on your screen in order to help Sequent Learning improve future webinars. We do greatly appreciate any feedback you can provide us. Again, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you all have a great afternoon. This does conclude today's session. You may now disconnect, and we look forward to seeing you next time.